Okay. So tell me about your research interests. Now, where do you think this is headed? Now, what are the questions you like to explore along the lines of this ownership, co-ownership, and maybe co-creation?
So in the framework, I expanded version of the Bridging Leadership Framework, which I called Transformational Leadership in Learning Communities. There are two elements there that is grabbing my interest right now. Two elements that are part of the theory of a learning organization by Peter Senge. This is the self-mastery and the mental models. No? Because I believe that as change leaders, we first have to deal with our belief system. Because the belief system will either expand my perspective of what is possible or limit it. And when I relate with other people to deal with complex issues, I will bump definitely against their mental models. No? And when I help people learn about these two concepts, eventually I get into concepts which in the West is called whole brain thinking today. No? But when I help people learn this concept, I'm basically using what I've learned from the classes of the late Father Bulatao, no? In helping people understand, because after learning all of these things from the West for his doctoral studies, he actually came home and studied altered states as practiced by the manghuhula, the manggagamot, this kind, no? People, special people who sometimes can be seen as weird. No? And it was from studying them that he was able to distill this into elements which he is able now to share in the classroom. And for him, if you can share it in the classroom in a way that you are able to have the same results as done in the field, then you know you have the basic principles. For example, you go to a manghuhula who seemingly has a crystal ball, and the impression is that he or she sees the future because of the crystal ball. But what does Father Bulatao do? In class, he brings actual crystal balls for us to look into the future, and we are able to do it. But in the next class, he brings a marble, which is a smaller version of a crystal ball, and we are able to see the future. And then in the following class, there is no more marble. He says, use your thumb. And we still see the future. Then he asks the question, so what's the point? And that's when you realize it's not about the crystal ball. It is about how to use your mind. That allows you to see beyond today. You know? So to me, today, I am so interested, no, to find out from gifted people, no, maybe interview them, study them, to better understand this thing which Peter Senge calls mental models, no, to understand how the mind works, and find out what are the basic principles, no, that we can apply in order to free it to be able to see more possibilities. Because as Dr. Otto Scharmer says, if in the face of complex issues, the past can no longer be our teacher, best practices can no longer provide answers to complex issues today, where do you get the answer? And his answer is, let the future tell you what is possible. But the question is, how do you use your mind to be able to get answers from the future? See, that is the area of growth that I want to, because I have a sneaking suspicion we already have such practices in the Philippines, especially among indigenous people. But they may call it differently, the movements may be different, but there are shared principles, very much like Father Bulatao was able to demonstrate that different methods, whether it comes from the Philippines or from other countries, can be distilled into basic principles that can be applied anywhere. And that is actually my area of interest right now. No? And again, because to me, the alpha and the omega of a change leader is still the self. So self-mastery and mental models are the areas I want to explore.
So have you done any experiments along those areas? Things that you've done yourselves, implemented?
Yes.
And what are your findings so far?
Yes. So for example, for 10 years, I was a therapist of burned out nuns and priests. And basically, those who came to me were people who had symptoms of physical illness, which could not be healed by regular doctors. So after visiting regular doctors who sort of remove physical reasons for the symptoms, then I know it is psycho-emotional. And I have used a method I learned from Father Bulatao, which is called affect bridge, which puts a person into altered state. And in that state, he or she is able to link, let's say, a problematic emotion today to link to the past, and the person sees where he or she first learned to feel that way in the face of a symptom. And experience has shown that once you become aware of this one, the source, the symptoms disappear. They start to think differently, they look at reality differently, ergo, they behave differently, and eventually create different results. So experiences like this have shown that when you change the mind, the behavior changes, and when the behavior changes, the consequences outside also change. And isn't new arrangements the final phase of bridging leadership process? Whether it is you alone or with other people, the interest of bridging leadership is to create new ways of being and doing. And hopefully these new ways of being and doing are positive realities rather than contributing to more problems.
So these mental models are not necessarily frameworks. They could be emotional.
You cannot separate.
Memories.
You cannot separate a belief from the way I feel about certain realities, and because of that connection, I behave in a certain way, which creates consequences or realities. So for example, a while ago, we were talking about lowlanders and highlanders. No? The history created a belief system, for example, that there are hierarchies, and because of that belief system, I relate with people in a certain way. Let's say if I relate with a highlander, and I was made to believe, or I learned to believe that I am better than them, I will relate differently as opposed to somebody who was raised in a culture where everybody was equal, as evidence, let's say, as in eating together. So whether you are my kasambahay or not, you eat with me, as opposed to a culture where if you are my kasambahay, you relate differently. So if I put you into altered state and you see in your mind that it all began because of the way we practice it at home, you are released from that mindset and now are open to new ways of thinking and doing. But for as long as you don't see that connection, you're stuck. And you cannot help but behave in that way.